Are your friends really foes and therefore hard to trust? Welcome to the Daily Devo. I, of course, am Vince Miller. This week we are in chapter 21 of 1 Samuel. I hope you have your scripture journal in hand. It's a great way to take notes on the great lessons that we're learning in the journey through 1 Samuel together. I've titled this particular chapter, Man on the Run, because David is on the run, presently at Nob, the city of Nob or town of Nob, which is the location of the temple, talking with the high priest Ahimelech. But on this day, there is someone present who is actually a spy of sorts. Let's listen to this occurrence in verse 7 of chapter 21. It reads, Now a certain man of the servants of Saul was there that day, detained before the Lord. His name was Doeg the Edomite, the chief of Saul's herdsmen. Now, this is kind of interesting here because Doeg is a crucial figure in the next chapter. So you want to note this verse and occurrence and everything we learned today because it's all going to play out in chapter 22. But here there are two details about Doeg I think are worth noting. First, he's an Edomite. He is of a people who have been enemies of God since the time of Moses. And the big question looming is why this man is detained and allowed any place of authority in Saul's kingdom. Second, we learn that he doesn't have a minor role in the kingdom. He is the chief shepherd or herdsman. If you recall, David also was a shepherd, and we would assume he was one of the greatest. However, David cannot be both a shepherd and a warrior, so Saul had to choose someone else with this particular skill, but his choice is a captured opponent, illustrating again the deteriorating discernment of Saul, which will actually play into his evil hands in the next chapter, because Doeg is not just a captured opponent and a chief shepherd, but a contracted spy. You know, sometimes people who look like friends might actually be foes. Sometimes people who look like friends may actually be your foe. And I think this principle is a hard to teach principle, especially for young teens. Because remember, during those impressionable teen years when teens are desperate for acceptance, they sometimes surround themselves with compromising people, which leads to, well, compromising decisions. And this was a hard learned lesson for me and even my children. I assume the same for you and yours. But this is true for adults too. When building new relationships in new situations, we can assume that people may have our best interests in mind, only to find out later that this is not entirely true. Thus, we learn time and time again, don't we, that some people who look like friends might actually be foes. And once we get burned, we trust less, become less vulnerable, and more suspicious of those who might be foes around us. Now, unfortunately, one application of this truth and reality is within a church small group. You know, many men hesitate to join church small groups because they perceive members as potential foes rather than friends. Now, this might seem like a little bit of a cop-out from some, but in small to medium-sized churches, I think their concerns are legitimate. Opening up about our hurts and hang-ups is risky when we're concerned that someone might breach a confidentiality and share that information with someone else. Well, guess what? This was David's situation. All of David's present problems were within the church and within his own family. He did not know who he could trust or with whom he could be vulnerable. He was suspicious at every turn. Then he turned to men of God, Samuel and now Ahimelech, only to later discover that nearby Doeg was a spy who would sell them all out. You know, when we as believers are vulnerable in situations, we need friends, not foes. When we are in a vulnerable situation, we need friends, not foes. But if we become vulnerable and get burned by a friend who is really a foe, it's hard to be vulnerable the next time, isn't it? If this happens too often, we can become resistant to any form of vulnerability. But here's the rub. It is only by being vulnerable we can test a friendship and then build lasting friends that stand the test of time. Vulnerability is difficult to learn slowly gained, quickly lost, and risky to recover. Let me say that again. Vulnerability is difficult to learn, slowly gained, quickly lost, and risky to recover. This is why so many men have issues with vulnerability. But listen carefully. You need to work through this. Past issues with foes are not present excuses for your lack of friends. You need at least one believing friend you can trust and be vulnerable with in this life. And it's not exclusively your spouse. It's someone of the same gender. Can't believe I have to say this. Someone of the same birth gender with grounded biblical beliefs who can speak the truth in love and give you the spiritual direction you need. So, brother, get a Jonathan and not a Doeg and build a friendship that will last the test of time. I love you like a brother today. Share this with someone you know who might be a brother. And I'll see you right back here again tomorrow with your scripture journal in your hand, by the way.